Hey, this is Brian and you're watching Tech Tips on Vital BMX. Hey guys, in this episode, I gotta take a break. Alright, I got a break. Okay, so today I'm gonna show you how to put on some brakes. When doing so, I'm gonna put on my front brakes, which is similar to the back brakes, but there's a few slight differences, which I'll show you later. But for the purpose of demonstration, I'll show you on the front today. The first step to putting on brakes would be to put the brakes onto the brake mounts. Putting lube on the mounts inside and out helps reduce the friction and can help your brakes work better in the long run. Now that the mounts are prepped, it's time to actually put the arms on. Obviously, each arm belongs on its respective side, and they should slide on fairly easily. Make sure you also keep the respective hardware on each side. It's very important not to mess up the springs because each spring is specific to its own side. Next step is to tighten down the spring and the hardware onto the mount. The next step after you have the arms on is spring tension, and spring tension is really important because it's actually what makes your brakes work. It's key to have equal tension on both sides. If you have unequal tension, that's when your brakes will pull to one side or the other. To have your brakes work the best, you want them both pulling at the same time and hitting the rim at the same time. The default position for your brakes to be is for the pads to be pulling outwards. And you do this by loosening up the spring bolt with an Allen wrench. All the while, you're going to have to use a crescent wrench to turn this hexagon-shaped bolt. During this process, these two tools, the Allen key and the crescent wrench, are going to work in conjunction with each other. The crescent wrench is what's going to set your tension, and the Allen wrench is what's going to keep your tension. So by setting your tension, you pull the spring so the arm is pulling outwards, and then take the 5mm Allen wrench and tighten it to keep your tension in place. So now that you've set your spring tension, it's time to adjust the brake pads. The first step in adjusting the brake pads is lining them up perfectly on the rim. Loosen up the brake pad and line it up so it hits evenly on the rim and tighten it down. Alright, so now we have the brakes attached, and the next step is to attach the lever. I can go ahead and find the right spot for my comfort zone, which looks about right there. I usually like to keep it a little bit off the bend just because that makes the lever give the max amount of reach. Again, where you put your lever is sort of personal preference, but typically near the grip because you don't want the grip to move in or out. So once I have my lever in place, I lock it down with the Allen wrench. Cool, so now we have the lever on and it's time to install the cable. So when you first take a brake cable out of the package, you'll notice that it's probably way longer than what you need. Now this is a good thing because you never know when you're going to need an extra piece of cable or an extra piece of housing. So it's good to keep that stuff around. But first of all, what we want to do is measure up the size of the cable. Before we can measure up the cable, we need to insert the cable into the lever. You want to make sure that you leave the barrel adjuster on your lever because this will help you adjust the tension later on. Once I've found my proper length, it's time to cut the housing. Make sure you mark the right spot before you cut. You never want to cut the cable and the housing together. You want to have it two separate cuts. So what you have to do is remove the cable from the housing, go back to the point where you marked it, and you definitely want to use a cable cutters to cut this because it'll make a nice even cut and you won't ruin the housing. Man, there's a lot of steps to this. Okay, moving right along. Now that we have the lever, arms, and cable set, it's time to move to another bike to actually adjust the brakes. So now that we're dealing with rear brakes, we're going to have two new elements, and that's the brake bridge and the bridge cable. The first thing that you're going to want to attach is the brake bridge, and it's going to attach to this piece of cable that's coming out of the adjuster barrel here. Installing the bridge is fairly easy. You just want to make sure that you leave enough space for it to move. You want to make sure that the bridge sits equidistant from the barrel and the seat tube because this bridge is going to have to move to make your brakes work. The second point about the bridge is when you tighten the nuts down, you're going to want to make sure you tighten those down good because this is definitely a place where the brakes can slip later and you don't want that cable to slip out of there. Sweet, so now we've installed our bridge and it's time to install the bridge cable, or straddle cable as some call it. So installing the bridge cable is kind of a three-step process. We hook one end into the allotted slot onto the brake arm. After that's hooked, it threads through the bridge, and then finally the other end is threaded through the lock nut. Alright, so now we have the brakes set. There's two more steps that we need to do to make this process complete. One step would be to clip any excess cable that's hanging off your bike. In addition to that, you want to make sure you cut it well and cover it with a cable end to keep them from getting frayed. So, last but not least, you can do any last-minute fine-tuning using these barrel adjusters. And these work great for getting your brakes exactly the way you want them.